Yeah, I don't know either. You kids, they just know. They know. They are very.
I think we have our group here.
Okay, I'm gonna record it. So you take care of that. Yep, I'll handle that.
Push them to top. Melissa, Melissa, are you going to get us started?
I am going to get us started. I am going to record so I can prepare the minutes.
Thank you.
And then we are going to get rolling. I'll kind of do the intro and then kick it to you, Madam Chair. All righty. Well, good evening, everybody. I think I've introduced myself to most of you all. Mr. Adams, I just missed you. But my name is Melissa Johnson. I am the Mayor's Deputy Chief of Staff, and I am so honored to be here with this exceptional group that has been assembled for this extremely important purpose. We are going to get started today with somewhat of an introductory meeting. We're going to start by acknowledging the fact that there was a slight discrepancy in the notice that was issued. Originally, it was noticed that this meeting was going to happen on Zoom. However, we did issue a press release on September 7th that indicated that the meeting would be in person. So I do want to clarify that for the sake of the minutes before we all jump in today to make sure that we are complying with sunshine law requirements. But to start off today's meeting, we're going to start with an introduction by each commissioner. We can honestly just go around the horseshoe. Please announce yourself, your work, and what district you are here to represent. Yep, we can start with you.
Well, my name is Pedro Zamora, and it's very unusual I get to start first.
Right.
The system that we are always in is always Z's are at the end of the line.
Yes.
It's my pleasure to serve with you all. I think this is a great opportunity to look at what our city's looking forward to. So I am the Executive Director of the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation. I missed a board meeting, and I was a board member, and they nominated me to be interim. And I thought I was smarter than that, and I read bylaws, but I missed a board meeting, and here I am 6 years later.
Thanks.
And I was in the process of selling my technology company, and which was founded here in Kansas City. And as people say, no one finds technology in Kansas City. In 2008, we started an industrial Ethernet manufacturing company when the smart grid industry was growing. So I've been blessed. I'm a product of the public education system of Kansas City, Missouri, in the state of Missouri. Had a great opportunity to live in the community I grew up in.
Nice.
I still serve that community. Although our organization is a community development corporation for the state of Missouri and the state of Kansas, we also build an ecosystem of a financial inclusion system. We're a community development financial institution as well. So it was something I was tasked to do and as one of my top 3 initiatives. Another initiative was to focus on equity and how equity is placed in our communities. And 4th district that I represent is probably the toughest district, I think, because we have big corporations, we have big banks, we have big everything, and we have low to moderate income people in this community. And I think what we're tasked to do is going to help balance that. So thank you, and I appreciate all your invested time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kokethia Hill. I am honored to serve the city that I love so much again. I am representing the mighty 5th District. It's the district that I had the pleasure to be the councilwoman for. I'm excited to be here. I currently am the CEO of Black KC. It's a educational justice and advocacy firm. We also support really great candidates to run for school boards in the broader Kansas City area. So anything that I can do to be of service to you while we're here and beyond, please know that you can count on me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill.
Hello, my name is Chris Llewellyn, and I'm representing the 6th District. I was born and raised in Kansas City, spent most of my time in the 6th District, a few years in the 4th. I own 3 restaurants in Brookside, Waldo. One of them's the Well Bar, Grill, and Rooftop, Lou's Grill and Bar, and also Charlie Hooper's in Brookside. I'm also an active real estate, commercial real estate investor, and own several pieces of property in and around the greater Kansas City area. And I'm honored that the mayor asked me to be on this board.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for those good times in those restaurants.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just so happens that I'm sitting next to my 6th District colleague. My name is Reed Day. I'm at large in the 6th here, and grew up in the 6th in the Southland, and with the exception of a few years in Washington, D.C. after undergrad, I've lived in the 6th District, and now obviously live in the 6th District here, and I'm an attorney for Lathrop GPM here in town, and echo my colleagues' comments, just looking forward to serving and figuring out how we can get this done in the best way that makes sense.
Great, thank you. Good evening. My name is Stephanie Smith, and I'm excited to be with you all and welcome your leadership as we really work collaboratively to get this job done. Really excited and thankful to Mayor Q and the city staff for the support that they'll give us in advance. I'm CEO, managing partner of Sofix Solutions. We're a change management firm. We help organizations navigate change through an equity lens. Grew up as a friend across the street on the Kansas side. Grew up in Wyandotte County and had some time to study and learn and grow across the country and away, and was excited to return back to Kansas City, this time on the Missouri side. I've had the best of both worlds, and I reside in the 1st District and excited to serve with you all.
I'm Martin T. Rucker II. I'm president and CEO of Martin T. Rucker Development. We are a trucking company and representing the 2nd District from St. Joseph originally, but live in the KC Northland now. Really excited to sit on this commission. Very thankful for Mayor Q's selection, and anytime there's an opportunity for collaboration and for serving our community, that's right in my wheelhouse. That's my jam. And so I'm really excited to be here with you guys and really excited to help move our city forward.
Thank you.
Mike Kellum with McClure Engineering. We're an engineering firm, offices in North Kansas City and Lenexa, Kansas, serving the Kansas City Metro. Serve as vice president and office leader here locally. We have worked with the city of Kansas City, Missouri on several projects. We're very thankful to be able to serve our community in that way, and helping with infrastructure projects and many other different things as well. Volunteered in a lot of different organizations in and around the metro, so this is, again, right in my wheelhouse as well. I'm very excited to be working with you all in this very important process. And so I have a city planning background, economic development background, so looking forward to applying that as well. So I know we've got several folks that have that type of background. So I did grow up not in Kansas City, but in the Northland. Spent some time in Texas, and then when I came back, I moved into Kansas City proper, and I do reside in the 1st District. And looking forward to working with every single one of you, and I really enjoy hearing everybody's backgrounds.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vicki Notice. It's just occurred to me that I'm in my 2nd generation of Rutgers. I think I worked with your mom in St. Joe.
Sure.
Layer it up.
Brownie points for I'm also a native of Kansas City. I'm representing the 4th District, which has changed, as Pedro mentioned, when downtown's got a lot more residential population, which is one thing the city was trying to get done, so that's been successful. I am an architect and urban planner. My firm is Collins Notice and Associates. We've been in business for 17 years. We do urban planning and sometimes governmental policy work within the region, mostly KCK and St. Joe and lots of places around here. Prior to that, I was Director of City Planning and Development here in Kansas City, which was a lot of fun, as Kyle knows. So I was with the city about 14 years. Prior to that, actually, Clinton and I worked together on the school DSEG plan. That was a lot of fun, too. So I'm a product of Kansas City, Missouri Public Schools, as well as are my kids, and feel very strongly about that. But I've been on a lot of different commissions and served on the Plan Commission, and actually I'm really looking forward to this because when I was here in 2000 is the last redistricting I worked on, but I was on that side of the table, so it's much more fun to be on this side of the table, I think. And I think the database that the city can provide is really important on this, and their expertise is going to be very, very helpful. So I'm looking forward to it, too.
And my name is Quentin Adams. I'm a lifelong resident of the city and lifelong resident of the 3rd District. I've been through this process before in 2000 and 2010, so I'm looking forward to it again. And I'm a semi-retired lawyer. I'm trying to practice on a part-time basis, but seems like I'm still working full-time. I was a little late getting over here. My office is across the street over in the old Tower building. And so I was still working on something. I was a few minutes late. Sorry for that, and hope to be on time in future meetings. So I'm looking forward to working with everybody here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Now we will have our city legal department, represented by our city attorney, Mr. Matt Gelati, to give us a brief overview and kind of introduction into some of the legal implications involved in this process. Thank you. Oh, I handed everybody one already. Yep, I beat you to it.
Ready.
Step one, city duplicates all its
Yes.
First of all, good evening. My name is Matt Gelati, or Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Matt Gelati. I'm the city attorney. First and foremost, I appreciate all of your volunteer service to help us with this process. It is it is a difficult endeavor. It poses political questions for our elected officials to have to wrestle with to reach a resolution. Normally, they have 9 months to figure that out, and they're going to try and do it in like 2.5. And so a lot of the work's going to fall to you and the city staff who can help you. So if at any point in time my office can be of assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me. As Melissa indicated to you, she handed out a memorandum I put together that talks about, and we say 50,000-foot view of things. This is more like a 100,000-foot view of things, right? And because it's important for lawyers to provide you a 2-pager of highly complicated statutory and constitutional issues that impact what you're doing.
That's right.
In preparation for tonight, I kind of wanted to say a couple things. One, there are some legal navigational beacons that we're going to have to try to stay within, and we'll do our best to help the commission make these recommendations to the council to do so. But second, and remember this more so than anything else, this is a political process, and from a certain perspective, there is no bright line one way or another. There can be any number of ways in which maps can be put together, can be drawn, and answer political motivations. But I think if we keep in mind the principles of one person, one vote, the concepts of ensuring that our minority populations are not disenfranchised as we look at the districts, then I think this commission can do very good work. And from that perspective, I'm happy to help you with that. Short of going into a diatribe or reading you the 2-page memo, I would just wanted to introduce myself this evening, give you the opportunity to review that memo, and make myself available in future meetings should you guys have any questions, or as you unpack the data and try to figure out how that graphically starts to look, where we need to be mindful of not running afoul of those legal constraints that do apply to this process. And so with that, if anybody has any initial questions, I'm happy to answer them, but if not, like I said, I try to give you a 2-pager and not overwhelm you with anything this evening. So,
Well, thank you, Matt. Appreciate your bringing this together. I do have an initial question. You broached it already about the typical timeline that this work is granted. I'm really excited that we have some veterans that can leverage their experience. But just curious about typically what is the timeline and how has it been reduced in this case? And is there anything that can happen that can ensure that we can be as thoughtful and equitable as possible? I mentioned this earlier to some of the colleagues that typically when we function out of a sense of urgency, those who have historically been overlooked and left behind, that follows, that happens again. And so just curious about what are our legal parameters if or can we advocate for a time shift?
right, okay. So first and foremost, that's a very thoughtful question, right? I will tell you the charter says what it says, and it is non-discretionary in the assumption that census data will be published in March of a given year, and that will give the council 9 requisite months to go engage in the political process and come up with some maps. The federal government didn't do us any favors. So from that perspective, I can't tell you that the charter has any relief valves within it. I think there could be additional analysis that I'm happy to prepare in a confidential legal memorandum or potentially in a future closed session for this group, should that be the direction. If that be the case, I'm happy to start working on that now.
That would be my request. I'm interested if there are any additional thoughts or concerns from the commissioners regarding the timeline. As our council has stated, the time has been what would typically happen around March or so and give this group more time to be thoughtful, has now been condensed into here we are in September with the task of presenting something by December the 1st. Any thoughts or considerations so that we can give our council time?
Madam Chair, I second your concern on the timeline, and I think it allows us as commissioners to reach out to the communities we're representing and be respectful to them as they have to be engaged and have trust in what we're doing. And that timeline is going to make it difficult. We're in the pandemic. We're dealing with shifts in governmental business dealings. I think maybe that's one way we can approach some time extensions for us. So.
Thank you. Other considerations?
Are we planning on doing community meetings or public meetings at some point in the process?
Well, that will be definitely part of our conversation and consideration, but surely we want to make sure we adequately represent the voice, and we look to the city staff to further support us in what those outlets might be.
I think that makes a big difference in scheduling our own agenda. If we don't get a release from a deadline, I think we have to have enough work done to take to the public so that it's credible and their time is not wasted. And then still have time to work on the input we hear from that. So whenever we get the entire schedules settled down, I think we have to be sure that we can do that and still meet the deadline.
Absolutely. Other thoughts?
I would just say that having not done this before, I was okay with the timeline in the beginning, and I think kind of figuring out what meetings we'll be able to have. Like, I don't know at this point if I would advocate for an extension, but after seeing kind of the work that needs to be done or the work that is scheduled to be done, and then looking at that timeline and trying to ascertain if that's realistic or not, I think then I would probably be more apt to ask for an extension if needed. But one thing that I do know is whenever you do have a timeline and sometimes a time crunch, it makes you work more efficiently. And so taking your comment into consideration, though, that groups may be left behind because you do run out of time, I'm very sensitive to that as well. So I would like to see kind of a timeline or a roadmap of where we're going and then be able to take a look at it or analyze that and say, do we think this is enough time to get through that roadmap and make sure that everyone is included.
Thank you.
I concur. I'm not that concerned about the timeline. I thought I saw something about, they say like we're gonna meet weekly, or they anticipate weekly meetings?
Yes, sir.
We meet weekly. I don't think the timeline is gonna be much of a problem. It's been my experience with the city staff that they've been pretty good about turning these proposed maps around pretty quickly. There was a guy who used to work over here, I don't know if he's still here or not, by the name of, I believe it's Steve Lebowski or something. He's not here anymore?
Steve
Oh,
retired
man.
a month ago.
He's
Look,
great.
and we have Cal as a partner.
Yes.
Okay, but Lebowski's great. I don't know, I hope this guy's good as Lebowski's great.
You heard it here
He helped
live.
us with the, I did school district lines a little while back, before this last one they just did for this last election. Steve Glorioso, myself, and Ray James were trying to do those lines. We worked with Lebowski. I mean, he was great. And he was good on the last city redistricting process. He was instrumental in that. But if they got somebody to take his place, that would be fine. I think if we meet weekly, I think we can turn these maps out. You know, I don't think it'll be that much gonna be that arduous. I don't believe. As long as we have the data available, we can get to it, and they can get the proposed maps turned around. I'm like Vicki. I want to have some input from the community. And it would be my suggestion that we hear that input first before we start drawing maps.
Sure.
Then draw some maps and then get some feedback after that. That would be my overall suggestion.
Thank you. Mike?
Madam Chair, I would echo my commissioner's sentiments. And I think that coming into it, I knew what the timeline was. I would agree if there's anything we could get as far as additional time, it would be great. I agree their public meetings would allow some insight for this group. I do think that if we're meeting weekly, we can create efficiencies. We can kind of meet the goal because, as Martin said, I think coming into it, I kind of knew what the timeline was, so I was prepared for that. I do think we have good staff and good data to work from, much different than we might have had even in the last redistricting process. The one concern I would have about lengthening the timeline is what effect that would have on the election cycle, which is coming up, and the filings and things of that nature. I think it creates an issue there as well. So that would be the one concern I would have with it, although if there's any way we could get some additional time, and it doesn't affect that, then I'd be willing to take a look at it and make an educated decision based on what our legal advice would be.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify real quick, Madam Chair,
Please.
that this is a charter-imposed requirement. And so the only way to cure a charter issue, in terms of thinking of permissive extensions, which I think many folks have said, is an election. And we're beyond the ability to do that at this point in time. So that is the task, but again, there may be some other considerations I'm happy to provide to the commission in a closed session at a future date.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. That does matter. It does make a difference. But I would love just for you to be able to have something that can just give us some further peace. But I hear you that it would take an election to extend the time, if any. Did I hear that correctly?
We'll take an election to modify the charter.
To modify the charter, and the modification of the charter would then give us a time extension.
Right.
I'm also hearing from colleagues that have spoken up that that if indeed this is the timeline that guides us, that our intentionality with hearing the voice of those that we have been charged with representing will be key. And so we want to make, Pedro, especially to your point of how the pandemic may impact our ability to adequately. We have all, Martin, to your point, and Mike's as well, agreed to this charge. And so we will definitely take all the support that we can get from the city staff to make sure that we are not overlooking voices and moving out of a sense of urgency in a way that harms people more than it helps them in this process. Any other consideration or thought?
So I guess there is no time extension, and so we kind of talked about that. We've kind of just said that that's not an option, so we've got to work within the parameters.
Yeah, there's no unilateral time extension.
Okay, so I mean, at least I know that that time thing's not going to save me at the end if we're not
Right,
there.
there's no last minute buzzer.
I'm also wondering, is this available right now on Zoom? I mean, publicly? Can they, or do they have to attend?
No, there is a public viewing component via Zoom.
Okay, so-
Yes.
So the entire city could watch this live?
Yes, and as we progress through meetings, this is kind of an introductory format. As we get further into the process, there will absolutely be a public comment dialogue opportunity so members of the public can express their concerns. Absolutely. We're kind of still fine tuning, and of course, it will be up to you all ultimately on how exactly that looks in conjunction with city staff. But that is absolutely a pivotal part of the process.
Yeah, unlike in prior iterations of this, where we've had the luxury of time, perhaps, I think Melissa points it out or illustrates it, and it doesn't make the task any easier, but there's some parallel tracking going on at this time. Normally you have the benefit of the data coming out, the opportunity for everybody to become acquainted with it, and then a legislative process kicks off an advisory committee informing the council. All that's being compressed, and so there's parallel tracks, and that public interaction component, public hearing component is clearly something this commission is interested in. I'm positive it's something the council is interested in. We're just going to have to figure out how that fits in with the work that you guys are going to be doing.
I have another question. Is the December 1st deadline when the council has to approve it?
No. The council is, if I remember the charter correctly, is the last day of December. And so,
That gives them their public notice and they,
right. And
But I
so
believe the timeline or the sketch of the timeline is a December 1st of presenting it and then a 16th.
Yeah, I believe the last calendared council session of the year would be that 16th, or around that week of the 16th,
Exactly.
so.
Becky?
Yeah, actually, it will be helpful for me as we go through the process to just talk about what are the loose and the tights. It's my first time, so I don't know if the entire process on when we have community meetings, are they in each district, are we doing, I'm not sure what part of that is completely up to the commission to decide, or are there certain tights that like, no, this has to happen by this date. The only one that I'm hearing so far is December 1st. That's first. And then the second is really taking some time to understand the census data. I mean, I know that it is very rich, but there are, some concerns for people post-COVID, like is there good integrity? Are we making sure that any council district change dramatically, that we have some time to discuss that before we roll out into a community setting so that we can anticipate those questions that might come up, since that will set the course for how we are measuring and counting folks as we draw lines.
And Matt, while this may extend past your purview, I think these thoughts are important to note as we have other city staff that will be able to support us in various ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions for council?
I'll just add one more. Is there info at Redistricting or something where we can provide or create that people can just kind of send questions or things that they might have, and we can have an opportunity to read those and digest it. That might be helpful for us to just anticipate and give the community an opportunity to send really nice, lovely comments to us.
And lovely, I'm sure they will
Yes,
be.
they will be
And so
lovely.
I can work on that to see if that is an opportunity, maybe redistricting at kcmo.org. I can definitely explore that option, or some other mechanism to kind of get a central repository of public comments, even if they don't come in at a particular meeting.
Absolutely, because what I would want us not to do is to lean on the fact that these meetings will be broadcasted on YouTube, on the city's YouTube channel and Channel 2, and think that that is our effort at community engagement. As at least from what I'm hearing, that would seem inadequate. And so how can we complement that, even with leveraging some of the existing platforms, Bang the Table, and other elements that the city has practiced in, but we never, for me, in my view, is we never want to overlook the impact of that in person as best we can for those that broadband and other access channels and avenues may be decreased. So anything else for our council? Thank you, Matt, so much for your
Not for our
time.
council, but for our
Yes.
seasoned veterans who've
Yeah.
gone through this once or twice. Knowing that we have a shorter window, your experience, was it more of a condensed, when you did it in the 9-month period of time, or whatever time that cycle it went, was it not weekly meetings, or were you?
No, I don't recall it being weekly meetings. We had
Okay.
regular meetings, and we had enough time. I know that we had meetings at one time, I think we had meetings in every district during the
Right.
process. And
Right.
then I think maybe the last time they had done like one north, one midtown, one south or something. But I remember ran several meetings to get public input. Sometimes they had maps, they had people to be able to react to those maps. But that's when we had a long drawn out process. We probably won't have that much time to do all that this time. I don't know what kind of schedule she must have set.
And I think Mr. Adams highlights the fact that, as a constitutionally chartered city, this process can look different each time. It really, there's not, 82, or RSMO Chapter 82 kind of sets a guidepost for the need to redistrict, and there's obviously statutory and constitutional frameworks that dictate, and Supreme Court case law that dictates the city has to engage in this process. But unlike in a Dillon's Rule context where a fourth-class city is dictated by statute how they have to engage in this process, the city has some flexibility. That being said, it's entirely possible the council can condition what you all do, and that can be good and bad in the sense that they can give you guardrails by which you can conduct your charge. And, that's always a possibility, I think, as well. And so I hope that answered your question. We kind of springboarded around there, but there is flexibility. Ultimately, this is an advisory body. It's going to be making a significantly important decision or recommendation to the city council.
And at this point, none of those parameters by the city council have been issued, correct?
Correct. What you have right now is the charter. It
Correct.
dictates a timeline, and we have the existing Code Section 2-41 that establishes the existing council districts.
Okay. Vicki?
I think before, when I was involved, I guess this was in 2000, I don't think we had an advisory committee. I think we worked directly with the operations committee of the council. But then we did meet with key leaders in every district and had a lot of public input besides that, and there was more time. But I think part of this may depend on what we're seeing in terms of what is obvious, that what has to shift. And I think that was the time when we had to really pull the 6th district around. We had to go counterclockwise to get everybody to get something equal. So knowing where those changes were going to be made a difference on making sure we had input from people who would be affected by that. And so when we know maybe a little bit more about what's likely to be the challenge, that might help us with doing either extra meetings, or we can split up and do meetings by district with not all of us at the same one. So there's several ways we can do that, but I think, I really think it's really helpful to have accurate data out there first, and to let people know before you get into a lot of the comments that are less informed about what this means, that we can all work from the same set of facts, and that will help the public a lot with understanding, what we can and cannot do, and what's a contiguous boundary and all those kind of things. So I think maybe if we at least listen to Kyle's presentation tonight, that's going to become a little obvious. But as we get that, I think we can design a process, I hope, in the time frame that's going to make some sense. And when we worked on it before, I think we just called some key people in to look at, we narrowed down from like 100 versions to like 20 or something like that, that was actually taken out to the public, which is a lot. And you can get it down to less than that if, yeah.
Process notwithstanding, to your point, the data is the most important thing. To the extent that then the legislative body is guided by one person, one vote, ensuring we don't disenfranchise our historically black minority voters, and ensuring that we approach the concept of equality in terms of what the ideal district is. The data is going to lay out what those problems are for this group in the very near future, relative to that charge, if you will.
And with that, I think if there are no other comments, we do want to create space for Cal to be able to present the information. I want to thank you, Matt and Melissa, for your guidance and support, and we look forward to walking with you. To my colleagues, you were able to get your eyes on this presentation. Cal will further
Madam Chair.
outline. Thank you. Cal will further outline how what we can expect on the dissemination of information. I wanted to make sure that, and you can expect this from me, that we have what we need in adequate time to be able to process it. And so I've talked about that request, making sure that we have information beforehand, but Cal will outline that all. Cal, while you're bringing that up, I do want to pause and just really, and I'm so delighted to already hear, it sounds like a chorus of consideration for how we move equitably through this process. How do we ensure that we are not overlooking particular groups that have historically been overlooked, and how we can make sure that this redistricting continues to produce representation, adequate representation. So thank you all for that. I also want to acknowledge, as Dr. Hill has stated, that there are some with experience, and we welcome that brain trust, and those of us that are coming in with fresh perspective. Another way of saying we've never done this before. And so that while Mayor Q and his city staff have brought together this multidisciplinary, cross-functional, and multi-identity team, I do want to acknowledge and break now the culture of perfection. For when we don't know something, or when it is important for us to get deeper and pause, please take advantage of that opportunity and pause us. That while we do have a timeline, I don't want us to be rushed over and to pretend to think that we know things that we don't, or assume that any of us are omnipotent. None of us are all-knowing. And so I really look for us to work collaboratively in this. So just want to remind us to move from this culture of perfection that may sit over us and really move more into a culture of accountability, where we can freely engage, question, challenge, assume positive intent, but recognizing that the impact is what we want to be most focused on. Okay, if there's any disagreement or another way of thinking about that, I want to pause to add your voice to this before we toss it to Cal. Any thoughts or responses? Okay, looks like we are in agreement. Thank you, Cal.
Well, appreciate everybody. I don't know if you guys were watching the screen while she was speaking, but the PowerPoint crashed. So one of the questions that did come up is, can we have a web page that has some of this information? We'd already had one set up. It doesn't have all of the functionality that you guys have discussed, but that is something we can definitely work towards. Part of my job here is also to kind of explain what you can expect from city staff and what our limitations are as well. Each map that we do is going to take about 4 hours, 5 hours to do, depending on complications. So in the past, when we've had time to make multiple scenarios, we may not have that luxury. So for this group to work efficiently and thoughtfully will be something that we have to work towards and think about. A week turnaround, or you guys having a recommendation and staff, turning that around the next week sounds good for you guys to meet, but for us, it'll have to be bite-sized so that we can actually do it. So beyond that, those are pretty much our only guidelines, our only requirements. We want to always double check our math before it comes out there, since this is all public. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at scenarios. Many of the things you guys suggested we have in this PowerPoint. We'll kind of run through them. If there's things you don't see, questions you have, feel free, raise your hand, we'll go through. It's a little bit of context on how we got here, and I apologize for it not being full screen. This will not let me do it, but I did send this information to you guys as well. So we'll go through it. So the current map that we work from is from a 2011 effort, much like this 10 years ago. It happened right after a 2010 map that we did based on another charter issue. If you're not familiar with the boundaries of Kansas City, basically this shape is what you're going to see throughout the project or throughout the process. And this does have the current 6 districts as we go forward. Population in Kansas City has increased. We increased 10% this time. We've got the last 3 in here. We've also got some information that's going to show how it was before as we go forward. Pretty good growth. The largest population Kansas City has ever had is about 507. So pretty good build-up here. We're looking good. We hope to continue that as we go forward. Historic pattern, I'll quickly go through this. This just kind of sets some precedent from where it was. This is the annexation history of Kansas City. So when you see some of the population growths and how they changed, this series of maps kind of shows where it was. So we started at about 700,000. The next biggest annexation was in about 1900. And if you look at the green area, that was the context of Kansas City at the time. 163,000 people. Once again, all this for what we're doing is just context. 1950 was one of our big changes as well. The next map will show you why it's so important. Really big population at that time for a pretty small footprint, 453,000, give or take in there. 1962, this is what it looked like when we just crossed the Missouri River into Clay and Platte counties. Still pretty good population, but an expanded footprint. 1962 is pretty much the boundary we have right now, minus a few areas of annexation and detachments. And what we currently have is a population of 508,090 people. Square footage-wise or acreage-wise, miles-wise, that's all this chart shows. We're just a big area, so we've got a lot of ground to cover, a lot of people to talk with as we go through it. I don't think that this map will actually work, but what this actually shows you is where the population of the city actually came from. Each dot is 50 people. And what we did with this map, and we'll make sure that we get the presentation out to you, is that it transitions 10 years, 1940, 1950, 1960 to current. It shows you where that population moved to. The one challenge here is it does follow current 2020 boundaries, so you will see some population numbers that are slightly different than what they might look like in the census. So it's using our current boundary, but with the populations of the time.
That's a super helpful slide, though, by the way.
Yeah, so if you guys do have the opportunity to pull it up, PowerPoint at home, it's kind of interesting. So one of the things that you guys mentioned before is how do we know who we need to talk to and where we need to talk to individuals. What this series of slides shows, and it works better if you can click through it, so just imagine how great it is when you do it that way. This shows you the context of where each district was, the population of Kansas City at the time, and the number of people that needed to make up, or the ideal makeup of numbers in those. The areas that you see up in here were portions of the city that didn't exist at that time. So that's 1966 was one of the times we did it. We did it again in 1968, and you see the number was still working off that census, about 80,000 people. But you can see the migration just modestly through there. And once again, if you have the opportunity to click through it, it works much better. 507, 1970, you can see a little bit of more population growth up in these areas. 1972, there was another change. 1977 as well, and what you're really seeing is these central districts, which we call which represent our 3rd and 5th districts, went from being really compact to kind of being a little more expansive, and that's probably what we'll get into this cycle as well, in order to make the densities work the right way. 1980, you can see all of the districts kind of got a little closer in size. 1990 as well. a lot of expansion. You can see the Northland actually gained a portion of a district. Might have actually been there in 80. Nope. So this is the first series of maps where that was the case. In 1991 as well. 2001, this would have been the series that Vicki worked with. 2010, the most recent one that we have, and then we did another one back to back in 2011. And once again, the reason between these two, and these are the two that I've worked on in the past, 2010, 2011, one was a result of a charter and one was a result of new census information coming out. What the information looks like as we go forward, this is where you guys will really want to look at it. And we had to break it out in a relatively consumable fashion right now, and as soon as we get more acclimated to it, we'll provide more detail. Generally, this is what our maps are going to look like. They're going to tell you what the current population is under each scenario. What this scenario shows is just current council districts with population. The breakdown from 2010 and 2020 kind of tells you the change and the percentages up and down. And I've got some spreadsheets, time permitting, that we'll run through. It makes this a little clearer. But pairing the two hopefully gives you an idea of the challenges we're going to have to work through in certain areas. Population now, 508,000 and change, basically means we're going to have about 85,000 people in each district. So if you look at the numbers and you subtract what we have in there or add what we have in there, that's going to tell you the magnitude of change that we're going to have in each area. Other things to consider that we're going to want to consider is election boundaries, tract boundaries, social aspects. So when we're drawing just to get the math, we might get the math, we want to consider these things. For Jackson County, we generally draw these boundaries based on voting precincts. And the reason we do that is that allows us to coordinate with Kansas City election board information, and that way we're always in compliance. In Clay and Platte County, in those portions, we follow the blocks. They're generally the same geographies. The challenge would be for the precincts is they're usually a combination of one or two blocks. So we try not to split those in Jackson County. We can if we really have to, but those are kind of some of the guidelines that we have as far as ease of use when we go forward. So for the Northland counties, we follow the blocks, and once again for Jackson County, we follow voting precincts. Any questions as we go forward, let me know. We also, compact contiguous, when we can do that, we'll appreciate legal's guidance on this. We fall into that area, we'll ask them to come back in and assist with that. Historically, here's kind of what the data looks like from 1970 forward. This is more anecdotal than anything. The real portion of the information we'll want to look at is 2010 to 2020. But as we are putting individuals in tracks, this kind of shows kind of where the trend has been over the last sequences of years. So there's some value in this information as well. That's the majority of the presentation. I do have a couple spreadsheets I can pull up. I can pause for questions at any time.
You said go ahead.
Where will we get this, like the census tract data or some more, I guess, explicit demographic data?
Yeah.
By district or by census tract or whatever. Age, race, gender, particularly age and race is what I think we need to see. The composition for, I think we need it by district. I don't know if we need to get all into the census tract data, but we might at least, if we're going to have to start moving around precincts and blocks and things like that.
So currently, we do have that loaded into those precincts, and we have it loaded into the blocks as well. So what we could show you, if for whatever reason Excel's not working either on this machine, my guess is
Show it
this.
on the maps, on some future maps, or can you
Yep.
show it on the?
We can show it on maps, and we can show it on Excel as well.
And Mr. Adams, that data has been requested, and so they'll be getting that to us in our, in the data well.
Does that include 2010 to 2020, the change then? Is that what you're asking? Versus just now?
I guess I really want to see
What it looks
what
like.
it is now, I guess.
What it is
Yeah,
now?
that's
I'd be
another
curious
thing.
on what the change is from 2010.
Yeah, the census information that's out right now won't allow us to show you 2010 to 2020 because the geographies have changed. So they change census geographies each year based on whatever jurisdiction says they need to change a boundary. So those boundaries change throughout time. So it's not a clear 1-to-1-to-1 ratio as you go back. They have not released that. We can do some things to get it close, and we can make the math add up at the end, but there's no guarantee that we're actually following the data exactly as you go forward. So we're interested in doing the same thing. Over a extended period, usually the census would have released that during the 9-month, 10-month process that we would have to do this. But as we've said right now, during this one, we could take a shot at that and kind of get a general idea, but it's not a set of data that we have at our fingertips right now.
So I'm hearing you'll do your best to be able to get that, and we'll be able to.
We definitely will. When we show that, we'll explain all of the parameters around it, that it's the best information we have at the time. And we've done that on overall population. We haven't done it on all of the other information, but we'll do our best to get that.
You mentioned in Jackson County you divided up by voting precincts, and in the Northland it's by blocks. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that is where it is, and I'm sorry, I think I might have kicked us out of Zoom.
On the road, Cal.
Yeah, apologize. Yeah, it looks like the Excel killed the Zoom. Apologize. Yeah, so the reason for that is making sure that during the voting process, the everything lines up. So Jackson County follows precincts, or requests that we follow precincts, and Clan Platte counties are generally okay with the block process.
What, Cass?
Cass, there's, I think, 1 or 2 tracks down there with about 104 people. They're all in the same, they make one census geography there, so it doesn't tend to be a challenge,
Okay.
or as much of a challenge.
Thank you. Questions, considerations? Thank you, Cal. I'm giving you a hard time, but this was really helpful.
Oh, no, that's okay. Technology's,
I have one quick question. Do you think they'll release anything else?
I honestly don't know that. So as we suggested, the previous process required that the information come out on January 1st for the overall information, and then March 1st was the time that they would release information so that you could start doing the redistricting processes. And in that time period, they'd put out further demographics, and they'd put out stuff that allowed you to show change. I haven't looked at the schedule on it. We knew that this one was going to be tight. That's why we've looked at ways to, through GIS, which is geographic information, overlaying it, to get the best idea of where things would fall. The last estimates we did, we estimated Kansas City was going to be 508,020 doing methods like this, and the actual numbers came out at 5,000 or 580,090. So pretty good process, but there's still some opportunity for
One
discrepancy.
reason I asked is, if they dribble that stuff out later, obviously after our deadline, which happens to be our charter, not every city's charter, is there a mechanism in the charter that if something comes out really unequal, once we have more fixed data, that we can fix that? Or should we just hope for the best?
I do not know that question, or the answer to that. That is an answer we will get you at our next meeting.
I think we want
Yeah.
to be careful about opening anything back up for a variety of reasons. If we get done, we should get done. But if something came in that really made some kind of difference, it'd be nice to
Yes.
know.
So as far as order of magnitude, I doubt that anything would be too far off. To ease those of you's comforts that worked with Mr. Lebowski, I will agree he is the best that we've had doing that. He helped us get up to this point. I've worked with Steve for 20 years. So the last couple processes, many of the maps, many of the other things I was learning with, just happened to be that he retired a few months too early to work on this one.
We're glad to have you, Cal.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So thank you, Vicki, because that was my question asked another way, which was the order of magnitude. What big are we missing? And I'm hearing you say, for the most part, this data that has been presented is what those chunks are, those big chunks that really help
Yep.
use as tools. But we would like to keep an eye on that, to Vicki's point. So thank you for that. Any other questions or considerations, Dr. Hill, and then Reed?
Just for the folks that have went through this process before, how, if any, impact do other maps weigh in? So I know like the school district is going through their maps and they'll be having community engagement. And as we are going around and trying to keep things, compact and contiguous, how much of that do we need to kind of lean into, or just, this is the process for the council, is the process?
Well, it's always been a little difficult, particularly with the school districts, because there's 14 school districts that take up some part of Kansas City's population, and it's, everybody knows where those are, but how they affect this is kind of difficult, and some of them have changed. They don't usually change very much, but I think, if I remember right, I think we looked at that to see what impact it might have, and whether or not we were like chopping one entire school district up into different districts, or whether that was some kind of advantage or whatever. But I think it's worth looking at because there are 14 of them. They aren't going to have a huge impact, I think, on what you would do with this information, but it might be nice to know when we're trying to project out population and growth. That's where I think it would be helpful, is where the central city schools are trying to grow and the suburban ones are growing anyway.
Can I ask you a follow-up, Vicki? As a vice chair of the CPC, Planning Commission, as you see new development, that is not yet lived in, I'm wondering how does that factor in when we're looking at census data or laws? Because there's a lot of different projects, at least I've seen, that are coming up that are in different areas, and so.
The city's master plan, comp plan that they're updating now is partly for that purpose, to be
Okay.
able to project where you think growth is going to go, and then infrastructure needs and all kinds of things enter into that, and sometimes different reasons for that growth. It used to be in the Northland a while ago, some parts of the Northland didn't develop because they didn't like the county school district that covered it. And when that changed, it really changed their growth pattern. And like parts of Kansas City North that are in Liberty School District attracted a whole lot of people, so they like jumped over an area, which means we have to pay for the difference in the infrastructure till we get up to where they are. So there's a lot, that's a really good point. There's a lot of things to take into account, and I think they will all have their own issues with strategy and their own like feeder lines and stuff. But I think it's good to know, because you can tell when you look at those district boundaries how it affects Kansas City, Missouri.
Reed?
Just at the top, you spoke about you need 4 or 5 hours to put together a
Right.
single map. And I guess this kind of goes to the timing questions that were raised earlier. Can you give me a little information? Is it you that is putting together the map? How many people do you have in your department?
Yeah.
And we're not using outside folks?
We are not using outside folks. So unfortunately, one of the spots that we have was Mr. Lebowski that I mentioned. We have 2 people that are primarily doing majority of the work, a gentleman named Brian Wise, who put all this information together, a gentleman named Tim Esparza, who told me they'd be watching this, but I bet you they're probably not. That also does the information as well. This presentation they put together. So those 2 would be doing it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we are updating our comprehensive plan at the same time. Same staff, same constraints, generally the same timeline too. So while this is a priority to get done, so is the other, but we will find a way to do it. So the 4 hour is a really rough estimate. If it's simple changes, it might be a little closer to that. If we go out to the public and they're like, go to this block, turn left, go to this block, turn left, those will take a little longer. And if they're even more than that, theoretically, and I couldn't even give you an example of what that would be, but something that staff would then have to go to the map and go, well, I think they're talking about this. That may take even longer. So that's just a ballpark. We should be able to turn these around, probably 2 to 4 per week. Any more than that, I would suggest it's probably going to be pretty tough for us to turn them around and then validate the information. So
precision and thoughtfulness on our end.
Yeah.
Prioritize, the mapping will be necessary.
obviously not trying to constrain the process that you guys are going through, but set some expectations of what we actually can pull off.
The follow-up, and very related to that, is what, you said bite-sized information to start to formulate the maps. What does that look like, or what's the most helpful thing?
For us, I just meant, 2 to 3 to 4 maps at a time, not, hey, here's the 20 we want to do.
Right.
If,
So
if
that
that's
prioritization.
if that's what you're expecting, I would expect to be a little disappointed with me when you talk to me at the next meeting. We'll have a portion of that done. I do mapping as well. I just don't do as much of it as I used to. So it could be that we have to go back into the reserves. I'll suit back up and we'll get back in there. But we try to keep the same individual doing all of the maps, and the reason we do that is so there's consistency throughout. While we just have 2 people doing it, it's still better that one individual's the person touching it, and the other individual, however we break that up, is coming back and validating the math and checking things. So how we do that is we always make sure that the end totals add up and that the individual sequences show up. So we'll do a better job of making sure the graphics work for you guys. The map that we will show you guys, the majority of the time, will resemble this one, but apologize, something's going on my phone. There we go. But it'll also have the demographics, so it'll have percentages and absolute numbers of racial breakdown in there. We can put change if you want, but more than likely, I doubt that we'll care about that as much as how close we are to that magic 85,000-ish number.
I heard age as well. Would you be able to also?
We can have age.
We need voting age.
Yep, we can have that as well. That's not a challenge, as long as the information is there, and I think it's there for most of it. So.
And
if I
so
may-
on scenarios.
I'm sorry, Vicki. Can everybody be sure to speak into the mic? I'm getting some emails that the people are having a hard time hearing. So thank you very much.
So when we come up with the initial scenarios, which might be, first and second are bigger than the others, so we have to carve something out over here, and 4 has to adjust down here. We could give broad
Yeah,
direction for like the first 3 or 4 to see what it does, and then we can either get more scenarios or we can start looking at the details of those to see if any of those make sense.
yeah, that's correct. That's how the last couple processes have worked.
So the scenario map is what you're talking about. We need 4 and 5 hours to
Yeah,
come up with the
yeah.
detail.
So if there are some you'd like us to work on between now and the next time we meet, that might be just a good primer to make sure that we understand the process and that you guys can look at what the numbers look like. Couldn't really tell you what that would be, and I wouldn't even hesitate to lead you in a direction on that one.
Yeah, I would like for us to be able to see what we have now with the additional identity markers that have been requested, which is the addition of age and ethnicity and race, as it stands right now. And then that way, because I wouldn't want us to lead ourselves before we get information. And then from there, we can take a look at that. And I would ask each of the commissioners to be thoughtful about if there are some particular scenarios, but still want to be cautious because we haven't heard anything from our community. A question that I had that I really want to get you all's input on, and Dr. Hill, you kind of broached it already, is the what's at stake question. And so would love for us to be thoughtful, in your question of how would redistricting affect development? How does it affect schools? So would love for us to really begin to just think through what are some of those things so we can have that particular consideration, especially as we are thinking through the various scenarios. Any additional thoughts? Vicki, you look like you're thinking.
Well, one question I had that might make it easier when we start is to just get a bigger scale for all of us of what's there today with the breakout numbers and then the street names on the boundaries so that we just have a more clear sense on a bigger scale exactly what the detail is now. It might help us see a little better some options that could make sense. That could be electronic or it could just be
So
computer or both.
we do have that. One of the slides that's not working that I'll make sure you guys get this evening or however our distribution process works out does have that. So what it also has on that is it shows the breakdown of many of the statistics that we think you guys are going to be interested in. If there's some ones that we can add and it doesn't make the map unreadable, we'll add it. I will just kind of give you a heads up on the composition of Kansas City. It makes maps with a lot of information very challenging to read. So the more you ask for, the tougher that map will be for you guys to work through. Not, once again, not trying to limit what you're asking for, just be prepared for the trade-off there. I think we've done a pretty good job of putting the information on there that you'll want with most of the boundaries that you're going to want to consider on, on the secondary or tertiary level of, neighborhoods, school district boundaries. We generally don't go down to the primary, secondary school level in those districts. We just do the overall ones because those do change. So.
I want to pause and ask Pedro, Mike, and Martin if you all have any particular thoughts or questions that you want to add to this.
Regarding the data that you're searching, I know there was a data concern. Is it census data that we're using? Are we restricted to use only census data, or can we use data from another data mining centric?
So that's probably more of a question back for the law department. The reason most groups go with the census information is because it's verified and accepted, and there's less opportunity for it to have a challenge one way or the other. Augmenting that with additional information, to get an idea. I think one of your questions for me in advance was some of the socioeconomic standards. It might be a good overlay to consider on it. We don't have a lot of those types of resources for us, so acquiring that might be a challenge. But we will field all questions and we'll tell you what we have and how we can work through it.
I think we have to use census data to draw the maps. Now, I think we can take into consideration other data that, like voting behavior and things like that, with respect to census tracts, as to where we may want to put census tracts.
Right.
But you have to use census tract data,
Yeah, that was all.
one man, one vote purposes.
One man, one vote census data.
But we can inform ourselves with respect to, and I know I'm going to look at the voting behavior in certain areas to see as to where they should be to protect, from my view, my primary concern is protecting minority voting interests. And one of the concerns one of the things I have is, and one of the factors I want to consider is that it's important to me that we do what we can to, if at all possible, within the guidelines, to make it more likely to give a Latino or Hispanic person a better opportunity to get elected to the council. We've gone through too many generations without Latino representation on this council. This time, I think we need to look at that be a factor we consider as we try to draw some of these districts. Based on the data I've seen so far, it appears that the city, again, is about 60-40. It's about 40% minority. But the council is, basically, the council districts, only 33% minority, the third and the fifth. So, I mean, those are factors we need to consider and look at and try to address during this process if we can.
And so, Pedro, to your question, and thank you, as Cal said, we talked about that previously. I will say and invite you all to share whatever those data strands are and what the makeup is that you're looking at so that we can share with our city partners to see as much as they can try to locate it within the census. And if not, at least we understand what we are looking at. So, Mr. Adams, to your point, things that you'll be looking at, if we can make sure that we share that data with one another so that we can begin to establish a common or a shared perspective in it, that will be extremely helpful. Back to my question of each of us pondering and being able to answer what's at stake, I would love for us to be able to disclose that and share with one another. As Mr. Adams modeled, we all come in with particular lived experiences and subject matter expertise that is shaping our narrative and how we see that. I think it's important for us to disclose that for one another so that as we look as a collective, we can be mindful of whose voice or perspective perhaps is not being represented on this. So this is not about us shielding or trying to, be quiet about our intentions, but it is about us being thoughtful about who is not represented or who might not have a voice in this so that we can be intentional in offering it. So thank you, Mr. Adams, for modeling that, and I would encourage each of us to be able to identify that.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Adams, on your statement there. What I ask is looking at different data, because we know, although the census was probably one of the best census that in recent time to get enough activity, we know there's so many, I would say, homeless and bed jumpers that are impacted by, throughout this COVID and throughout the census period. It was very difficult, but we still had great numbers. And I think that using other data sources to kind of look at who's living where. And, we know HUD uses data to understand where your cell phone identification number is to find who's living in what household. And I don't know if that's a fair process, is it legal, but thank you for clarifying. The census data is important for us. But I just fear that we may miss a few folks that are sensitive to all our needs of trying to ensure that we make the right decisions and we provide the right social and economic advancements in these boundaries that we're going to be designing.
Thank you, an important acknowledgement. In addition to recognizing that those who mistrust systems, in particular government systems, are also not as well counted in census. So we know that there are several deficits that as we leverage the census data, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there is natural bias within the tool that affects the output. So thank you so much.
What do you say? But I'm not clear. Can I ask you a question? I'm not clear with you. You said, we know there's undercount. There's undercount of,
Yes.
particularly minorities, especially Latinos and African Americans and others.
Yes.
And generally an undercount of less low income people. But I don't think we can't like use other data to say, to increase the numbers, I don't think. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I appreciate you clarifying that.
I mean, that's what
I was asking
I
the
mean,
question.
that's what you're asking?
Yeah, that was the question.
Okay.
Was there other data that we would look at? What source was our data that?
To make up for the undercount? I don't think we can, but
Okay.
the city attorney can answer that for us maybe next week.
Yeah, we can definitely, if we can add that to the list, but as my understanding, we can't, the census is the validated marker. What I am saying is that we can still acknowledge the other tools so that we can have understanding of what the deficits may be, as that kind of shapes out and influences our decision-making.
Oh, I got another point about that. And it might be when we have the differential, you got that 10% differential. Maybe we can factor that in when we're doing that, like maybe. We can draw some of the districts where we think there's more Latinos or uncounted people. Maybe we can make those a little smaller. And,
That 10% swing.
The 10%, you have a 10% differential, you can go.
Yep, and for clarity, that 10% differential is between the largest district and the smallest district, not from district to
Thank you.
district. Yes, sir.
Good clarification. Other questions? I know Martin, Mike would love.
I think it's a great dialogue. It's been spirited, and it's all very interesting to me, and it all kind of culminates exactly kind of what I stated in the beginning and why I'm here is for equal representation. And what that, I mean that by socioeconomic class, I mean it by race. I also mean it by region of the city. I mean it by Northland and Southland and all those things, and it becoming, it's one land. And so, things are changing, and those lines are going to change as well, but keeping or growing the continuity between that divide there that's at the river and making it not a divide. And so making sure that we have the representation up there and protecting this economic development that's going on in the Northland as well. Making sure that we're able to continue to see that thrive and prosper because those tax dollars benefit the entire city. And so those are dollars that we can use. We'd love to see, be spent in the Northland as well, but also that comes south of the river and can help out with a lot of things down here as well. And so, again, I think it's all been very thoughtful here, and I share a lot of the common interests that everybody does around this table. And I think the collaboration is going to be good, and I appreciate your chairwomanship and your transparency so far throughout this and making sure everyone's voice is heard. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is about, is making sure through representation that one person, one vote, that everyone's voice is heard.
Thank you.
Very eloquently put.
It was.
I would echo those sentiments. I think that, the one question that I would have is just around the process. So after we run through the maps, and this may be for staff and for my commissioner friends who have done this before. Once we get down to a set of maps, say we're down to 4 or 5, that we've kind of collectively agreed where boundaries are they're close, what is the process from there for approval, and when do we typically need to be there? I guess, is it by a vote of the commission and majority rule? What does that process look like? That's a question that I would have.
So I don't know what the voting weight has to be, but yeah, so if maps that this group agrees to would then go to council, and council would then consider whether or not they want to approve it or not. So, you know, that is another thing we'll get you the absolutes on. So I don't know if it has to be all 9 or if it's simple majority as it goes, but it's an easy enough bylaw to get you guys.
I would just, final comment would be, at least for this portion of the meeting, is to say that I would agree. I think looking at how we can create an environment within the city where all the districts are adequately represented, and with taking economic development into consideration, I think there's so much opportunity for the city of Kansas City that we're already seeing now, and how we can work within each district to have that continue to where everyone's continuing to prosper. That's what I'm looking forward to doing, and I do appreciate everyone's comments tonight, and I'm excited to see where we can go with this.
Thank you. And just a reiteration, or at least a clarification on what I heard the request of is, what are the time benchmarks perhaps of the process?
Yeah, when do we need to have that narrowed down to really the key handful of maps that we're going to get into the serious discussion around? I think initially it sounds as though, I think we've had some conversation around what the initial maps might look like, just anecdotally. I think, when do we need to get down to that finite discussion of where we're really getting into moving, blocks versus, complete portions of the city?
And I appreciate that question because it's in the process. Chris?
Madam Chair, I had a couple questions. The first one was, how hard and difficult would it be for me to get individual district maps with the street or boundary, be it state line or a river or whatever that is? I'm just trying to quantify where they all kind of interrelate, and it was difficult for me on that to do. Now,
Certainly.
I don't want you to go spend 5 or 6 hours on that. I might be able to figure it out myself, but
So-
something simple you could do.
One of the first things that we do when we draw new boundaries is we then publish bunches of maps. So that's not a technical term. That's just the one I picked for lots of maps. We have those ready. We can send them out to you. They don't have population information on it, but they will tell you what the boundaries are of those. We also have a couple different tools that we'll send out to you that allow you to do that dynamically, so you can zoom in on those if you want and zoom out. The map that we have that's going to show you where the precinct boundaries are and the population of those precincts and the identification marker, that tells you this is precinct 1, precinct 10, or block 110, whatever it happens to be. That map will allow you to do that too. I apologize for the technology not working. I did not consider that this machine wasn't updated like mine, but we'll get you the data.
Thank you.
Okay. My second question is, in 2010, when the board approved, was there any manipulation on the city council's side? What was the difference between what the board passed and the city council passed?
That's a great question. Great question.
I don't think there was, but I think right after that, didn't there some projections come in or something, and they changed the maps or something?
So
I remember, as a matter of fact, Lucas was on that committee. They had a committee, and I think Quentin was on that, might have been on that committee, and they talked about doing, and we did, do map. No, we had a big fight out in the 6th district and between the 6th and the 5th. I think the council did change them after that, based on some projections, I thought, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure.
So in 2010, there was a charter issue, and I apologize if I misstate. That basically said, I think, and I don't think it's a charter issue anymore, that you couldn't have 3 elections under the same census district. So timing of it required for them to do one through projected census information from the 2009 data, which was actually a little higher than what the actually 2000. Yep. Then what the distribution of it was obviously off too. And I may have those details a little bit wrong, but that's generally what it was. So then when the information came back, and that was done in December, the information came back in January, the next month, and they got it in March. They did the process again, which allowed them to produce the maps that we have right now. Yeah. To my knowledge, both of those times, they pretty much followed the recommendations of the scenarios that the group like this put together. However, I did not set in those closed session conversations. We did produce maps, and I don't remember making changes in between. But
I was kind of involved in that process. I don't know, I might not have been on the commission, but I know I was involved in it from the community basis. And as I recall, I think the council accepted the map that the commission produced.
Okay.
But I'm not sure.
Good question. I was curious.
Well, and I also think it's to everybody's best interest to have a collaborative process so nobody gets to a point where we're submitting one thing
Yes.
and the council finds it completely unacceptable. And then, I mean, we need a lot of conversations in a lot of parts of the city and with a lot of leadership. And I think we need to feel our way through that as we find out what some of the obvious, maybe not so obvious solutions could be, so that we can be creative if we need to be and get some people to think about something they hadn't before. But I think it would be not in our best interest to actually vote on something, hand it over to the council and have it
Absolutely.
collapse or whatever for lack of communication, so.
We will have, the intention of this is to have an aligned process where we have been monitoring, adjusting along the way, taking in consideration. That's back to my question of you, and when we meet again, would love for each of us to be able to talk about from our perspective what's at stake and what our perspective is lending to, so that we can be thoughtful about that group and we can begin to build towards what we want to present, because we not only do we have a condensed time, which means we have less room for any back and forth that may happen. So we want to be as aligned as possible.
To Vicky's point there, that we don't want to send maps out that would be not accepted, the parallel tracks you mentioned, can you restate, is the council doing a parallel effort, or is it city?
no, this is the city's effort right now. So yeah, communication back with council will be something that we'll likely want to do as a group. They'll likely be pretty in tune with that as well. Yeah.
Right, no surprises.
Right.
Well, the reason I think the data is so important is that everybody can rely on the data itself, and what you do with it, we might have some conversations about, but I think it helps with any other body that's interested, any other business group or any other neighborhood or whatever, or the council, that everybody's working from the same data and they understand how you got, why you're doing something, instead of we just took some markers and drew up a map. I mean, I think the accuracy and it helps a lot to have the data as everybody's shared basis of information. And the conversations will be a lot easier based on that.
I would like to ask this question of each commissioner. What do you need as you are constantly processing and still now? So I dare ask this question. But what do you need in order to be successful as you examine what has been given and working to figure out your next steps? So whoever would like to answer, would love to hear from each of us. And it could be that I don't know yet. That's a fair answer, but just want to make sure that we're communicating our needs.
Madam Chair, I can start. I think one of the things, and Kyle alluded to this earlier, I think there's going to be, for lack of a better term, a data dump for all of us, to where we're going to be able to review a lot of the information that they've already put together based on the census data that they have. That's ultimately what I need in order for me to feel like I can start digging into the information and understanding, what data we have, how we're going to process it, what questions that we might have surrounding that.
So a data dump.
Yeah. I
Give me
think
what
just-
you got.
Yep, get the information in our hands, so the next time we can come to the meeting and start having discussion around that. And I think that's ultimately what I'm looking forward to and looking for. Right now, I'm working off of this presentation. I appreciate staff getting to us early, so we could come into tonight's meeting at least with a little bit of a background. And so I think just building off of this and understanding what we're looking at, and getting into the process of putting together some high-level maps and at least starting to form some discussion. And I think it's just going to, my understanding is that's what it's going to be, is it will start at very high level and then we'll really start to work down into the very, very finite detail.
Thank you, Mike. Yes.
I need public input. That's what I need. I need to know what the issues are. I like to hear what the Northland interests are. I like to hear from the people on the plaza, because I know there are a lot of rumors out there, people talking about the district having this shift and the plaza going into the 6th district. I don't know, all that kind of input. I know there are concerns out in the 6th district and about in the 5th, and how the configuration is going to be. So I need public input, public information, so we can identify the issues and start trying to take that in consideration as we draw these maps.
In public information, I'm hearing through directly engaging with the public, and then are you saying any other?
I would like to have an opportunity to get people who want to come in to say something, or to come in to do it, or by Zoom, however they do it, give us some input as to what their issues are, from a neighborhood perspective, or, individual voters' perspective, whatever.
Thank you.
Vicky talked about developers, like what developers have to say about these maps, these configurations.
Others?
I would just echo what both of them have said, get the data dump, and then get the public input. That's going to be extremely important as well. And then I think the map overlays with the demographic information in there, because I feel like we kind of have a set parameter of what we can do. We need about 85,000 people in each district. They need to be contiguous, and they need to be of simple shape. And so once we start to see those breakdowns in what we have here, it seems to me, anyway, in my simple mind, that we would be able to kind of just work off of this and adjust with those numbers and with those demographics to kind of figure out a few iterations of some good maps to then take to our council people, to the public, and get that feedback. And then also piggybacking with the timeline that we'll get with the benchmarks and things that we need to hit along the way to get this deadline done. I think for me, those would probably be the things that I'm looking for.
I really appreciate how you broke down the three parameter pieces, and I want to maybe throw that back to the city staff, and to see if that articulation, as simple and clear as it was, is that accurate? I mean, I heard the 86,000 people per area. You said a simple shape, and then what was the third one?
Non-contiguous?
Yeah, the non-contiguous.
And
Is
then
that
the Voting
accurate?
Rights Act as well. We've
Yeah.
got to
Yeah,
make sure
compact, contiguous, and then you have to consider the 10% concept as well, and then the voting blocks based on making sure you're not drawing the line so that you don't disparage certain blocks of voters.
That would be the only add-on, the minority kind of an analysis, absolutely.
And if that has already been outlined, I apologize, but I'll request that we put that down very simple. So as we are looking at our North Star, we'll add some other things, but we know that is the
Yes,
parameter.
and that is outlined in the legal memo. We
Okay.
can break it down further if
If it's in there.
necessary, so please just let us know, and we can further break that down.
Yep, I see it in the layout. Thank you.
If I can piggyback on
Please.
that, I think it's really important. I'm come from the world of establishing norms, or saying again, and again. But I think as we open up with any slideshow that's publicly, that we start with those kind
Yep.
of guiding principles and points, so that we just reiterate over and over again. As I think about, I need everything that you guys have said. I'm old school too, so I'm like a printed copy every once in a while. When we get to that point of actually like looking at the map and looking at the boundaries, if you just send it to me, I know the city is trying to be fiscally responsible, so I'll print it myself. But also just really understanding, like cultural districts. I know that, if the plaza, like it really means something to them to be a part of like what does that mean when we start shifting? Whether it's entertainment districts, or whether it's, I think about Swope Park, not that Swope Park will move, but just understanding that some of these, when we're drawing these lines that cross over some of these cultural entertainment districts, that they are very much a part of the fabric of that neighborhood and field and council district. Also, just really thinking about, as we start shifting the boundaries, does it put any, I don't know if I could say this here, but any incumbent where they're no longer in their district? Right, I think that's
That's part of it.
important to like kind of note and figure out those addresses. I know it might happen, but, again, just being sensitive to that. And then I might need a tutorial on these tools that you say that we have. I love gadgets, so like how can we shape and manipulate those in a way that helps us do some learning before we
Yep,
actually
we'll
come.
run the group through any of the information we've got. And you're correct about seated elected officials. That is one of the things we put on here as a consideration. I think technically, and we'll go back and verify with law, you can draw the line where somebody's out of office or out of their district, but probably something that we want to stay away from as well. That's why that's a
They
consideration.
probably wouldn't
We always
like
try
that.
to avoid that, you know.
Yeah, I would definitely do that.
I was gonna ask for a clarification on exactly how that gets handled, so if that needs to go to legal to get
Yes.
a more direct legal answer, by next week, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm 99%, but I'm not gonna commit to that last one. So,
We'll leave it to legal.
yep, that's the best way.
I'd like to add something to what Dr. Hill was heading towards, and that is, our city's very sprawled out, and there's 300 square miles, and we have agricultural areas inside the district, and we have an urban center, and we have great suburban things and historic neighborhoods, and they all have some slightly different needs of their council representation. And so as we look at all these issues, I think we also have to look at the context of making sure that one group doesn't get completely marginalized because they're a historic neighborhood and they wound up in a district that they're the only one or something. So, I mean, just the context of how Kansas City's laid out and what those cultural boundaries are, Dr. Hill, that you were talking about, and Pedro, that we just keep it in mind. I don't think we need to draw around that. I think we need to keep it in mind as we
Awareness, yeah.
look at the pros and cons of some of the options we're going to have.
Thank you. Other needs? All right, I'm hearing data dump. We need to hear from public interest and understand what's at stake from the various perspectives, map overlays, having clarity by creating norms and communicating what the standards, what the charge is for this work, and making sure that we're repeating that and communicating it to our fellow residents. Printed copies, which is important. I want to make sure that we're getting this. Understanding the cultural districts and the social impacts. That's also outlined on the presentation that Cal and his team sent. Tutorials on tools. That's going to be very important because without that understanding, we won't be able to work our tools. The awareness of the unseating of elected officials and what that means, and just other impacts, I will say. And then ensure that groups are not, I think the term was completely marginalized, but even considering what marginalization might look. We may not want to stretch it to complete, but just understand where marginalization is taking place. As you walk away and continue to think about this, as I will, if any other considerations come up, please be sure to reach out. You can feel free to reply all, as transparency is extremely important. I want us to be able to share our information, our queries, and our concerns, so that we can once again have a culture of accountability. But of course, I'm always open and present. I will be working with the city team as we continue to bear this out. One final thing I would love for us to do is to be thoughtful about what our cadence will be. We already know, and many of you have said yes to meeting weekly. But if there is a particular consideration of day and time, we also want to consider, as Melissa and I have been able to discuss, the ability for us to perhaps move this meeting up. Would a 4 to 6 work? A 5 to 7? Where are you all at with that? Is there any quick check-in? You can think about it more, but just want to take a temperature.
I like Wednesdays, and I like afternoons or evenings. I'm flex on that. I'd be okay at 4, at 6, 5. That's fine with me.
Any objection?
Same here, I like Wednesdays, and moving up to 4 sounds good to me.
I would agree. I'm in agreement with that.
I agree.
Okay. No Bible study goers.
I
Okay,
have
great.
Maybe one request that might be fair or not, but I think after your experience with the last redistricting, maybe the city captured feedback from the community. I mean, could that be available considering our time is being reduced, I'd kind of like to hear some of the feedback that may have come out and the concerns that, so we don't.
It's
I'm
10
sorry,
years
the shift-
old. It's 10 years old.
But some of those same folks are still around.
Yeah, I don't know if they,
Yeah,
they're
I think
retired.
beyond the maps that we would have, I'm not sure, I didn't run that process, whether or not that even exists.
Pedro, what was the request? Can you restate?
Just the feedback from the community when the redistricting took place.
So any concerns,
Oh, that
any,
impact.
any overtones that were there?
Issues. I remember there were fights about the 5th and the 6th, and
Okay, so
the
you
people in
shared
the 6th district, a lot of blacks in the 6th district didn't want to get, they wanted to stay in the 6th, they didn't want to come into the 5th. We had to move out, we had to move to 3rd. Because the 3rd district, generally, you lose more population every decennial. To preserve the minority rights, as they said here, we always have to move the 3rd further south into the 5th.
Right.
Then we had to move the 5th further into the 6th. Well, a lot of the blacks out there in the 6th, they didn't want to be in the 5th. They wanted to stay in the 6th. And so we had to fight with them over that. The 6th district, consequently, and we had some issues over in Brookside area, because Brookside got split, quite frankly, and it was unfortunate. But right now, the 6th district goes all the way down to 59th Street.
Yeah.
And a lot of people over in Brookside were kind of, didn't like that, but everybody, we finally reached a concurrence in that the most important thing was protecting minority voting rights in the 3rd and the 5th. And the 6th district got pitched further north, the 4th district got pitched further north, further up north the river, all the way up to Barcliff, and then I think it goes up. Underground.
Well,
There
and
might be something similar to that this time around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very
So
helpful.
those are the kind of issues, but they're discrete issues. I don't know if it's, it may be some value to you, I don't know, but
That's very
I
helpful.
don't know if
to
we
me because
recorded it or not.
It's very helpful because I do know that there has been a shift, a migration back into the downtown population, and it's not minority.
Downtown's really grown, yeah.
Well, and I think as we get deeper into these maps based upon race and ethnicity and age, we also understand that our black community, black and brown community, also lives elsewhere other than the 3rd and the 4th district. And what we have not been able to adequately capture is the votes and the considerations of those individuals because they are simply just masked out. And so these maps, once again, will be extremely helpful in us understanding our who and where, because I think we also have a lot of narratives, whether they are inherited or not, that continue to help us and cause us to think about particular districts in other ways. And so I'm excited about us also bringing that into our consideration as we are mapping that out. So with that, are there any other questions or considerations?
I do have one closing comment, at least on my
Please.
behalf. As we continue to do this work, I do have to comment on the Sunshine Law implications of mass emails amongst this body. This is a quasi-governmental body, so therefore it is subject to open meeting laws. So if you all are corresponding with each other and one issue is mentioned, that's technically not a convening of a governmental body, but once you kind of start getting into the weeds of actual business, making decisions especially, then that does become a public meeting that needs to be noticed. So please be cognizant of that. I think the easiest way around that is to use Madam Chair as kind of a funnel to the city.
So scratch what I said.
Right, which we can iron out. We can iron out further, but I do want everybody to be mindful of that.
Well, thank you, and that's why you're here.
Yes, ma'am.
So I will acknowledge that error and encourage you all to send it to me. However, we will commit ourselves to transparency and making sure that we are good stewards of this role. Vicki,
Absolutely.
did you have more to add?
Do we want to recommend that all press requests go through you as well, Madam Chair?
Well, at this point, I know we've already got it kicked off, haven't we? But that's just a credit to who each of you are as individuals, and you're meant to be, you should be people that people can reach out to and know. But I would make that request just so that we can make sure we have an alignment of communication. If you can communicate all press requests and other inquiries so that we can make sure that we're tracking those. Thank you so much, Vicki.
Yes, great point.
What we're gonna do, so we're gonna meet next week here, the same, at 4 o'clock, I guess, is that it?
Wednesday at 4, it seems like that's the consensus.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is there's agreement in that Wednesday at 4, and yep. So plan for that. I will follow up with any additional communication, and once again, we'll work to get these items out to you as soon as possible so you can begin to process them and print them out as needed.
Are we gonna start drawing maps first, or we're gonna get public input first, or?
Let's at
How do you-
least get one version of maps.
Yeah, I think,
first.
yeah.
Can we get a couple of versions in? I'll get a couple of versions, we're gonna get one version.
Well, I mean, yeah, several to get started, and then we can design a process that helps with the input in a
So
logical.
we'll send a map out tomorrow that's going to show you what the current boundaries look like, their overpopulation or their underpopulation. And on that map, it will tell you the number of people. It won't tell you their makeup. So it won't tell you their race or their age or anything like that. But it's going to tell you just simple math, plus and minus what you need to get. So
Okay.
it's
You already sent it, didn't it?
it's similar to that one. It's got a lot more detail on it.
Right.
It's a PDF that you'll be able to zoom in and zoom out of. And there's another tool that's really similar, but it's in a different format depending upon what capabilities your machine at home has.
We'll start out with maps, and then I will ask you all to bring in ideas about what that community engagement and public interest. We'll also ask our city team to begin to outline what that could look like and what existing platforms we can leverage, so that as we move out of our second meeting, we can have a better idea of what that gathering public interest looks like.
Is this meeting on public broadcast right now, or are they going to be moving forward?
Yes, this meeting is currently being broadcasted on the city's YouTube channel and Channel 2, and all future meetings will also be broadcasted similarly.
Perfect. I just want to be able to get that out so as many people that maybe not be able to make it to our public comment sessions can at least watch this and send once we get that set up. I know the city does a great job of putting out information, but I think we can all help with that
That's
as
right.
well and make sure that we're reaching people that may not be reached through city channels and just helping with that inclusivity.
Thank you.
And can I add something just for general, just for
Please.
my thinking process? Is this, how, are we wedded to this current configuration where it looks like most of the maps are drawn north-south? Most of the districts are drawn north-south, well, maybe the third may be east-west, and the fifth. Or is anybody amenable to maybe changing the configuration of the districts to maybe go east-west and?
I would say that's part of our task, is to be considerate of that. And once again, we'll take a look at the existing overlay that will be sent out, and then we will allow community voice to help further shape out the scenarios.
All right, thank you.
Reed?
My follow-up. If we have a map coming tomorrow of what you've discussed, but it does not have the age, race, other demographic data. Can we get that prior to next Wednesday's meeting, or?
If you guys will give me a moment, I have one copy printed off upstairs. If people want to touch and feel it, we wanted to make sure that it was readable, and I can show you what information's on there. If there's additional stuff that we have that we can put on there, we can do that. Take me 5 minutes to go get it. It's entirely up to you guys if that's all right.
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
All right, then give me a moment. You can time me.
Thank you.
Come back.
Right. This is great escape. Any other questions or considerations? I look forward to your feedback as you process what the flow of this, our first iteration together. And if there's any additional things that you would like for me to consider, and especially other tools that you think might be helpful. Melissa, anything else before we call?
Nothing else from me.
Okay, so with that, we will adjourn our time together, planning to meet next Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And for those that are joining us, you can join us YouTube, Channel 2, and perhaps Zoom. Melissa will give me confirmation if that's true or not.
Yes.
Yes, that is true. And I want to thank each commissioner and congratulations on this responsibility. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
to the developer, such as cash, in many cases, a free garage that provides parking for the new development, and even land. So, and we've seen that in recent developments. And beyond that, there can even be some fine print in some of these developer agreements that give special benefits to developers that aren't really known by the public until the project starts operating. And those can be perceived